Hello, everybody, and welcome to the special episode of Prinsights Global, coming to you directly live from the Rick Rule Natural Resource Symposium in Boca Raton 2025. And I'm here and thrilled to be welcoming Frank Giustra, who has so many hats, among them being the CEO of the Fury Group. And I was fortunate enough to be on a panel with Frank the other day here at the conference and have some really interesting conversations with you over dinner. You covered so much of the reason why it's in the next state of its existence, actually, not physically, but in terms of a monetary power anchor.
Yeah.
Because that you can't put that genie back in the bottle.
You can't. It's too late.
Right.
It's too late. And the other genie you can't put back in the bottle is curing these deficits that the U.S. is generating. I think that train has left the station a long time. The system is set up such that it's almost impossible for any politician, as well-meaning as they might be, to turn that tide. You know, you look at the makeup of the U.S. budget, 86% of it is made up of non-discretionary spending, interest costs, and military spending. And they're certainly not going to cut military. They're putting that up. Non-discretionary spending is very political. If you start cutting into, Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare. And so you're left with 14% of the budget, which you can tinker with and this is where Musk came in with his whole plan that he was going to cut $2 trillion and quickly found out that he wasn't going to get anywhere near that. Like people laughed, going, where are you going to cut? Right. And even within that 14% of discretionary spending, there's a whole herd of sacred cows in there that will never be touched because people are serving their home constituents and they have promised all sorts of goodies. Look what what's her name did in Alaska. She signed off on the big beautiful bill because she got an extra little goodie for Alaska, and she goes, "I'm Alaska first." And so that's, I think that the U.S. system is broken. It's been broken for a while, and that the spending is so out of control now that there's no reversing that train. And I think that there will be a day of reckoning. And I know it hasn't happened so far, but we're only at $37 trillion of debt.
And rising.
But in 10 years it's going to be $57 trillion or $60 trillion. The deficit this year is going to be higher than last year. So I think we're going to be around $2.4 trillion. And by the way, $2 trillion plus every year as far as the eye can see. And then you have your unfunded liabilities, $100 trillion. Nobody even talks about that because they don't have a solution. No politician will address that because they know they don't have an answer. It's unfunded. It's money that's owed and promised that is not there. It does not exist. So you got all of these issues. So I think we're coming to there will be a moment in time in the U.S. when the U.S. goes through a U.S. dollar crisis. That's going to happen. Now, listen, I never predict the timing because it's really hard. Bubbles can last a lot longer than anybody ever expects. Bear markets isn't going to last as longer than anybody expects, and the U.S. can stay, afloat and not have the world crash around them for a lot longer than we expect. But at some point, at this rate, there will be a revolt by buyers of treasuries, and certainly from the foreign markets first. I think that they're the ones that they're disappearing the first. And already the two biggest were China and Japan. China's been working. It's from 1.1 trillion down to 750 billion. They're selling steadily. They're trying to get rid of most of their treasuries because they know that they would be sanctioned if, by their adversary, the United States. And Japan was the most reliable and the biggest owner of treasuries, finally started selling. Was it 2 months ago? They sold 3 months ago, $50 billion worth, because them for different reasons. They got their own monetary and fiscal problems at home, and those problems are coming home to roost now, and they need to support the yen. Mm-hmm. So how do you support the yen? You have to sell dollars, and what dollars you sell? Treasuries. Right. And so that's, and the rest of the world is, and then you have the BRICS who are thinking about a new system, and they're going, well, do we need more dollars? No. Do we need less dollars? Perhaps. Do we need more gold? Yes. And so you're seeing that shift take place. So the trend is intact. It's happening. The timing of it, is it tomorrow, 5 years from now? I don't know. But we're going to have a day of reckoning where people are going to go, I'm sorry, you want me to buy your U.S. Treasuries? I need 5%, 6% on the 10-year, 7%, some number that is going to bankrupt America with the amount of debt that it has. So, and then you got Trump wanting to replace Powell with someone that will do it as he says, and that's going to happen by next May at the latest. Finds a way to try and fire Powell, which is not allowed to, but and he wants somebody that will drive rates down to that will take rates to 1% from their current. So ask yourself, he'll get his way. He always does. He's pretty good at getting people to fall in line, and so he'll find someone that will take direction from him, which, as much credibility that the Fed has left, which I don't believe it has any credibility, but whatever credibility they have left, it would be totally shot if the president could say to him, okay, you're no longer independent. You are going to follow my lead, and I want rates of 1%. So what does the market do if rates get driven down to 1%? How do you think the market's going to react? I think it's going to panic. You're going to see that people are going to feel, okay, well, we're going to get more inflation now. Maybe obviously the equity markets might continue to go up some, but certainly from the dollar's perspective and the ability to support the value of the dollar against other currencies and against gold, it's going to come down dramatically. Yeah. Okay, and that causes, as you know, inflation. Lower, weaker currency. The U.S. has been exporting its inflation because of its overpriced dollars for decades. If that starts to correct itself, they're going to bring that inflation home. And so then it creates this vicious cycle because inflation goes up, people want higher yield on the longer rates, on 10 years, 30 years, whatever. And then the U.S. has to finance its debt pile at ridiculous rates, and then it just becomes a spiral. And I predict, as I said I think, was you disagreed with me or Danielle Booth? Somebody said that there will be no QE.
You're saying,
okay,
so
she said, and I followed her work, and she said on the panel the other day she doesn't see QE coming. I'm going, I don't know what math you're using.
Yeah, it's a hard disagree.
I'm just real hard disagreeing. I'm saying, what happens when your buyers? You have to just this year alone. In the next year, $9 trillion worth of U.S. debt matures and has to roll over, plus a $2.4 trillion deficit. That's over $11 trillion you have to find buyers for. There's only total $5 trillion in savings in the U.S., so the domestic audience can't do it. The foreign buyers are mostly disappearing or selling, which is even worse. Who's the buyer of last resort? Always and everything.
It's the Fed.
It's the Fed. And how do they do that? Printing money.
That's almost their day job.
It is their day job. So we're going back to money printing, and they're going to, they're not going to call it QE this time. They're going to call it something else. They've come up with so many fancy names for money printing over the years. Anyway,
there's a reverse repo.
Yield curve control. They'll come up with something. Yeah. How the Treasury is doing enhancements at the moment, which is kind of I called that QE light, and she misunderstood what I was saying. I said no, they're not printing money, but it tells you that the bond market, government bond market, is not functioning well when they have to do enhancements, and that is why it's called QE light. It's not because it's QE, and so I think that I am almost personally 100% certain we're going back to QE. And when that happens, this go-around is going to be way worse than the last two go-arounds. Okay, like this to me will probably be the final hurrah where people go, oh, it's over. It's over. The dollar we need a new monetary system because the dollar is done. And there will be a crisis. And when it becomes a real crisis is when the domestic audience loses faith in their home currency. And we've seen this in other countries when the domestic audience goes, I don't want dollars. I got to get rid of them. As soon as I get them, get rid of them and buy real estate, groceries, whatever. Just spend it as quickly as you get it.
Right.
You see it. I saw it in Argentina. You've seen it in Turkey. You've seen it in many countries around the world where you have these hyperinflation moments, and people just got to get rid of the currency as quickly as possible because it loses value almost daily when you get hyperinflation. So that's where I think we're heading. Yeah. How the U.S. reacts to all of this, I don't know, but it's going to be a national security issue, and it will be treated as such. And I think, people go to war over these things, and you look throughout history when there has been a change in a monetary hegemon from one to another, it very rarely happens without a conflict. The only time that it happened without a conflict was World War II, and the Brits kind of took the back seat to being the global power. The U.S. took the mantle, and it was done peacefully between the U.S. and the U.K. And I don't think the U.K. had any choice.
Right.
They were so broke. But But I think if you look throughout history, when these changes take place, it's usually with war, and that's scary. In today's world, that's really scary. That's the one thing you don't want.
Well, I would love to continue talking to you for hours, and I really hope that we can have a further conversation on this, because everything you've just said, I absolutely agree with. We've been on this page before, but what I think we can also agree on is gold is good.
Gold is good. It is. And and listen, I look at gold, and this is the other sort of the way that it's looked at, I think, wrongly, okay? Gold has one purpose. It's not about getting rich. And this is the part that people need to understand. Unlike Bitcoin, which is promoted to a level, it's all about getting rich. Whatever they tell you about store of value, people buy Bitcoin because of the hype and they want to get rich. Gold should be treated different. Gold is your store of value.
Yes.
You take a percentage of your total wealth, 10, 15, 20%, whatever, but somewhere in there, you put it in gold, physical gold, and you forget about it. Okay, that's, you want to make money and speculate, go buy mining stocks. But the physical gold is about preserving, right. And that's it. It's a store of value, preserves your wealth over the years. That the same amount of gold that bought a fancy tunic 2,000 years ago will buy you a nice gentleman's suit today. Mm-hmm. It holds its value. It's that simple. And that's how it should be treated.
Well, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and all of your insights over so many years. You are amazing. You are inspirational. Gold is good. Thank you so much for joining us here at Prinsights.
Thanks, Tommy.
And thank you to all of you for tuning in to this very special episode of Prinsights Global.